Imagine a transaction where cash changes hands in a matter of minutes. The surface of this interaction presents a simple exchange of capital for services. Society looks at this exchange and sees fast liquidity. People assume it offers a shortcut to wealth or a quick escape from poverty. They see money moving quickly and they mistake velocity for profit. But peel back the surface layer and you uncover a brutal ledger. This ledger does not balance it, operates on a predatory architecture, designed to strip wealth, enforce control, and transfer risk. What looks like a fast influx of cash is actually a highly engineered economic trap designed to bankrupt the individual on every conceivable level. Welcome back to Money's Hidden Past, where we examine the underlying structures of the global economy. Today, we investigate the dark math of prostitution. We are focusing specifically on the economics of exploitative and trafficked systems. We will break down the numbers behind severe margin extraction. We will analyze how debt bondage functions as an infinite mathematical loop. We will calculate the nonlinear tail risk of the environment. And we will expose the negative lifetime value that ruins individuals long after the cash stops flowing. We are going to look at the receipts, the contracts, and the economic reality of treating a human being as a depreciating asset. But before we open the ledger, please hit that subscribe button right now, leave a comment below, and let me know. If you believe society understands the financial mechanics of exploitation, your support helps this channel reach people who need to hear these stories. Let us begin by analyzing the gross revenue a client hands over cash. The public assumes the worker pockets this money and builds wealth. The reality reveals an aggressive system of margin extraction. The shadow economy relies entirely on middlemen, pimps, traffickers, syndicate bosses, brothel owners, platform operators, and corrupt landlords operate like predatory tax agencies. They seize anywhere from 70 to 100% of the gross earnings. The worker absorbs the physical labor. While the third party captures the capital, we can break down a hypothetical transaction to see exactly how this extraction works layer by layer. Suppose a client pays $300 for an hour of time. The worker does not keep $300. The house or the trafficker claims a mandatory 50% cut right off the top that leaves $150. Then the ledger deducts operating expenses. The worker must pay a fee for the physical room they occupy. They pay a fee for the security guard standing outside the door or monitoring the hallway. They pay a fee for the digital advertisements posted on the internet to attract the client. The system forces the worker to pay for their own marketing, their own security, and their own workspace out of their remaining cut. And the extraction does not stop at operating expenses. The organizers implement a system of punitive daily fines to capture the rest of the revenue. They charge a fine. If the worker arrives late, they charge a fine if the worker takes too long during a session. They charge a fine if the worker complains or breaks a minor rule by the end of the night. The worker might hold $30 out of that original $300. The system functions exactly like a predatory franchise model. The worker generates the revenue, but the franchise owner extracts all the profit through mandatory fees. The worker acts as an independent contractor, carrying all the overhead liability but receiving none of the equity. This level of margin extraction keeps the worker in a state of perpetual financial insecurity. They touch thousands of dollars every week, but they own none of it. The money flows through their hands and travels upward to the organizers. This is not an accident or a glitch in the system. It is the core design. If a worker accumulated capital, they could afford to leave the system. They could buy a train ticket, rent an apartment, and walk away. Extracting the margin ensures the worker remains trapped at zero. They must wake up the next day and repeat the process just to secure basic survival necessities. The system starves them of capital to ensure they return to work. But simple margin extraction is only the first layer of the trap. The organizers require a mechanism to ensure total compliance and eliminate the possibility of escape. This brings us to the second pillar of the dark math, which is debt bondage. Multipliers. Debt bondage serves as an ancient economic tool of control. Historically, landowners used it to trap sharecroppers in agricultural fields. Mining companies used it to trap laborers in remote company towns, paying them in scrip instead of national currency. Modern human trafficking, syndicates weaponize this exact same math to control human bodies. The trap begins with a fabricated principal debt. A trafficking syndicate smuggles an individual across a border or moves them from a rural town to a major city. The organizers hand the victim a bill for the transport. They might declare the transport cost $50,000. The victim has no money, so they agree to work off the debt, but the math guarantees the debt will never reach zero. The organizers control the accounting book entirely. They apply arbitrary interest rates, compounding the debt weekly or monthly. They charge the victim inflated prices for basic survival. They charge premium rent for a mattress on the floor in a crowded room. They charge inflated prices for food, bottled water, clothing, and hygiene products. All of these daily living expenses bypass the victim's hands and add directly to the principal debt, and the organizers use punitive multipliers to accelerate the debt faster than the victim can earn if the victim refuses a client. The organizer adds a $500 penalty to the ledger. If the victim gets sick and cannot work, the organizer charges a daily inactivity fee, replacing the lost revenue with fresh debt. If law enforcement raids the building and confiscates the cash, the organizer holds the victim financially responsible for the lost money. The victim works exhausting hours, generating thousands of dollars in gross revenue. But when the organizer tallies the book at the end of the month, the living expenses, the interest, and the penalties exceed the earnings. The $50,000 debt grows to $55,000. The next month, it grows to $60,000. The debt operates as a mathematical cage. The organizers use the illusion of a shrinking debt to motivate the worker, but the ledger remains rigged. The worker can never outpace the multipliers. This leads us to the third concept, nonlinear tail risk. In traditional finance, investors calculate risk using probability models. If you buy a volatile stock, you face a linear risk. You might lose 10 or 20% of your principal investment. You balance that risk against the potential reward of the stock rising in the exploitative sex trade. The risk profile changes entirely. The worker faces non-linear tail risk. Tail risk refers to the probability of a rare catastrophic event that wipes out the entire portfolio in this environment. The catastrophic event does not involve losing money. The catastrophic event involves physical violence, contracting a severe disease, or facing arrest and imprisonment. When a worker engages in the system, they roll the dice on tail risk with every single transaction. If a worker sees 10 clients a day, they expose themselves to the statistical probability of severe harm 10 times a day over a week. That is 70 exposures over a month. That is 300 exposures over a year. That is thousands of interactions with unvetted, anonymous individuals in highly unregulated environments. The math of probability dictates that over an extended time horizon, the likelihood of encountering violence approaches near certainty. It ceases to be a possibility and becomes a statistical guarantee. A single violent encounter can end a life or result in permanent physical disability. A single disease can require lifelong medical treatment. A single arrest can trigger the collapse of a person's freedom and legal standing. The dark math of this system reveals a stark asymmetry in how risk distributes across the participants. The trafficker, the pimp, or the platform operator prices this physical risk at zero for themselves. They sit in a different location, far removed from the physical interaction. They collect the revenue while holding none of the physical liability. They transfer 100% of the nonlinear tail risk directly to the worker. If the worker suffers injury, the organizer simply replaces them with a new victim. The organizer treats the human being as a disposable asset, operating a business model that internalizes profit and externalizes physical destruction. This dynamic brings us to the final and most devastating economic reality: negative lifetime value. We must evaluate the long-term economic trajectory of the individual trapped in the system in a standard career. Your earning power grows over time. You gain skills, you earn promotions, you build equity, and you develop a resume. You start at the bottom and climb a ladder of increasing value, securing your financial future. Sex work, specifically under exploitative conditions, operates on a reversed economic curve. It features negative lifetime value. The system strips equity from the worker year after year. The highest earning potential usually occurs at the very beginning of the timeline. The system assigns a premium to youth and novelty as time passes. The worker ages, and their market value drops. The individual faces rapid depreciation of their earning power. To combat this depreciation, they must work longer hours and take on higher risk clients just to maintain the same level of baseline revenue. They increase their exposure to tail risk just to tread water. While the revenue drops, the long-term liabilities skyrocket. The primary liability remains the criminal record. Many jurisdictions criminalize the worker rather than the buyer or the trafficker. If law enforcement arrests the worker, the state creates a permanent legal record. A criminal record acts as a permanent economic anchor when the individual eventually tries to leave the shadow economy and secure standard employment. Employers run background checks. The criminal record erases access to traditional jobs. It erases access to safe housing. It erases access to financial credit and educational loans. The legal system brands them, blocking their exit path and forcing them back into the underground economy just to survive. The secondary liability involves severe compounding healthcare costs. The trauma of the environment generates massive physical and psychological damage. Survivors of exploitation suffer from rates of post-traumatic stress disorder that rival combat veterans. Treating this trauma requires years of specialized therapy, prescription medication, and continuous medical care. But the system stripped away all their capital during their earning years through margin extraction and debt bondage. They exit the trade with zero equity, zero savings, and zero health insurance. They face a mountain of medical debt with no mechanism to generate traditional income. They age out of the system, holding a ledger full of liabilities and a resume they cannot show to a hiring manager. The shadow economy also extracts a societal cost. When individuals exit this system broken and bankrupt, the burden of care falls on public health systems and social safety nets. The traffickers enrich themselves and leave the state to pay for the resulting trauma. They privatize the financial gains and socialize the human losses. When we aggregate these four pillars, we see the true architecture of the dark math severe margin extraction strips. The daily capital debt bondage multipliers ensure total compliance and prevent escape. Nonlinear tail risk guarantees eventual physical or legal catastrophe, and negative lifetime value destroys the future trajectory of the individual. What looks on the surface like quick liquidity acts as an asymmetric economic trap. The system is perfectly engineered to extract maximum short-term value from the human body while transferring all long-term liability and risk to the worker. We must recognize the pure mechanics of this exploitation. When society debates these issues, people often focus heavily on morality, ethics, or personal choices. They argue about legalization versus criminalization, but they frequently miss the underlying economics driving the trade. The shadow economy operates as a ruthlessly efficient corporate machine. It identifies vulnerable individuals. It isolates them. It strips their resources, and it discards them when their value depreciates. Understanding this math changes how we view the victims caught inside the machine. They do not represent individuals making lucrative short-term financial decisions. They represent human beings caught in a predatory financial system designed to bankrupt them on every conceivable level. If you found this breakdown of the economics of exploitation helpful, please hit that like button right now. It helps this channel grow and tells the algorithm that these honest conversations matter. Share this video with someone who studies economics, sociology, or human rights. We will keep exposing the hidden financial structures that govern the shadow economy and dictate the flow of global capital. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Stay curious, ask tough questions, and look past the surface of every transaction. Thank you for spending your time with me today, and I will see you in the next video.